The envelope felt heavier than it should have. Crisp bills neatly stacked, a quiet reminder of everything they had been through. He placed it on the table between them, his expression unreadable. "Take it," he said, his voice devoid of warmth. She hesitated, her fingers hovering over the envelope. "This is what you want?" she asked, searching his face for a flicker of hesitation, a silent plea to stay. He leaned back, exhaling sharply. "It's for both of us. You'll be better off this way." A bitter laugh bubbled in her throat, but she swallowed it down. "Better off," she echoed, shaking her head. "You mean you'll be better off?"
His jaw tightened.
"Don't make this harder than it has to be." She studied him, his tired eyes, the tension in his shoulders, the way he avoided looking at her directly. Maybe he really believed this was the right thing. Maybe he had already made up his mind. Her heart clenched, but she forced herself to nod. Slowly, she took the envelope, gripping it tighter than necessary. "Fine." Standing, she turned on her heel before he could see the tears threatening to spill. She walked away, and she told herself she wouldn't look back. But the next morning, the world seemed to shatter. His face was everywhere, on the news, on social media, on the lips of strangers in passing conversations. The once composed man she had left behind was now a hollow shell, disheveled, devastated, broken beyond recognition. Her hands trembled as she stared at the screen, his empty gaze haunting her. Had she really won? Or had she just lost everything? The screen flickered, displaying his image over and over again. His usually sharp suit was nowhere to be seen. Instead, he sat on the steps of a building, hair disheveled, his face buried in his hands. A group of reporters hovered around him, their voices distant through the television speakers. Sources say that business mogul Adrian Blackwood was seen in a state of distress outside his company headquarters early this morning. Witnesses report he appeared. She muted the TV, unable to listen anymore. Her heart pounded against her ribs as she stared at his image. This wasn't the Adrian she knew, the man who always had everything under control, the one who made decisions with a level head, never once showing weakness.
But now?
Now he looked broken, and it was because of her. The envelope sat on her bedside table, untouched. She had barely been able to bring herself to count the money inside. It was supposed to be her fresh start, her way out of whatever twisted relationship they had found themselves trapped in. But if walking away was the right choice, why did it feel so wrong? Her phone vibrated against the wooden nightstand. "Ava, did you see the news?"
Call me.
She ignored the message, but another came in immediately after. "Ava, he's in bad shape, Liv. Really bad. You need to talk to him." Liv exhaled shakily, pressing the phone against her forehead. Talk to him? What could she possibly say? She had made her choice, hadn't she? The city lights blurred through the taxi window as Liv pressed her hands together, fingers trembling. She shouldn't be here. She should have let this go. But her heart had other plans. The car pulled up outside a familiar apartment building, the one she used to call home. Her chest tightened as she stepped out onto the pavement. The doorman hesitated when he saw her, his expression flickering with recognition. "Miss Carter," he greeted, his tone cautious. "Mr. Blackwood, he's—" "I know," she interrupted softly. "Can I go up?" He hesitated before nodding. "He hasn't left since this morning. I don't think he's in the best state to receive visitors." "I won't stay long," she lied. The elevator ride felt endless. With each passing floor, the weight in her chest grew heavier. Finally, she reached his door. Her knuckles hovered inches from the surface, hesitation gripping her. What if he told her to leave? What if she wasn't ready to face what she had done? Before she could talk herself out of it, she knocked. A long silence stretched between her and the closed door. Then shuffling. Slow, hesitant footsteps. The lock clicked, and the door opened just enough for his face to appear. Her breath caught. He looked even worse up close. Dark circles framed his tired eyes, his usual sharp presence replaced by something raw, something undone. He stared at her as if she were a ghost. "Liv." His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. She swallowed the lump in her throat. Hey. He blinked, as if trying to convince himself she was really there. Then, without a word, he pushed the door open fully and stepped aside. She walked in. The place was a mess. Empty glasses, papers scattered across the floor. A half-finished bottle of whiskey sat on the coffee table next to an untouched plate of food. She turned to him, her heart aching. Adrian, what happened? He let out a sharp, humorless laugh, running a hand through his hair. What happened? He repeated bitterly.
You left.
That's what happened. Her breath hitched. You didn't even look back, he cut her off, his voice shaking. You just walked away like it was easy. She flinched at the words. It wasn't easy.
He scoffed.
Could have fooled me. Silence. She clenched her fists. You gave me the money, Adrian. You told me to leave. I told you it was for both of us. His gaze darkened. But I didn't think you'd actually take it. A lump formed in her throat. You made it seem like you wanted me to. He exhaled, shaking his head. I wanted you to fight Liv. I wanted you to tell me that the money didn't matter. That we mattered. Her stomach twisted painfully. So, what? This was some kind of test. No, he said softly. It was a last chance. The weight of his words crushed her. Tears burned in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. I thought I was doing what was best. His lips pressed into a thin line. Yeah? And how's that working out for you? She had no answer. Because as much as she had tried to convince herself that walking away was the right decision, she had never felt more lost. And judging by the man standing in front of her, she wasn't the only one. He rubbed a hand over his face, exhaling deeply. Why are you here, Liv? She swallowed hard. Because I saw you on the news. Because I couldn't ignore it. His gaze searched hers, unreadable. And now that you're here? She hesitated. I don't know. Adrian let out a slow breath, nodding as if he had expected that answer. Then, I don't know what you want me to say. Another stretch of silence. Finally, she stepped closer. Are you okay? His laugh was hollow. Do I look okay? She bit her lip. Adrian. You shouldn't have come, he murmured. Her heart clenched. Do you really want me to leave? He hesitated. For the first time since she arrived, something in his expression cracked. His shoulders tensed, and his throat bobbed as he swallowed.
No.
The admission was barely audible. And just like that, the fragile distance between them shattered. Adrian exhaled, running a hand through his already messy hair. His body seemed to waver, as if exhaustion had finally caught up with him. He looked at her, really looked at her, and Liv felt the weight of his gaze settle deep in her chest. She wanted to say something, anything, but the words caught in her throat. Finally, he stepped aside. Stay if you want. It wasn't an invitation. It wasn't a plea. It was something in between. Liv hesitated, glancing at the mess surrounding them. The untouched food, the empty bottles, the discarded papers. A stark contrast to the man who used to control everything in his life down to the finest detail. Have you eaten today? She asked softly. His jaw tensed. Does it matter? Yes. He sighed, rubbing his forehead. I wasn't hungry. That was a lie. She knew it, but she didn't call him out on it. Instead, she turned toward the kitchen, ignoring the surprised look on his face as she opened the fridge. Unsurprisingly, it was nearly empty. A few takeout containers, a carton of eggs, a lonely bottle of water. She sighed, pulling out what little she could. Sit down, she said over her shoulder. Adrian blinked. Liv.
Sit.
His lips parted, as if to argue, but something in her voice must have convinced him otherwise. Because for the first time in what felt like forever, he listened. He sank onto the couch, watching her with unreadable eyes as she moved around the kitchen. The silence between them was thick, unspoken words lingering in the air, too fragile to touch just yet. She worked quickly, scrambling eggs, toasting bread, and brewing a fresh cup of coffee. It wasn't much, but it was something. A few minutes later, she placed the plate in front of him. Adrian looked at it, then up at her. You don't have to.
Eat.
She crossed her arms. Just a few bites. A beat of hesitation. Then, with a sigh, he picked up the fork. Liv didn't sit. She didn't move. She just stood there, watching as he took the first bite. He chewed slowly, like he wasn't sure if he even tasted the food. But then, something changed. The tension in his shoulders eased just a little. His grip on the fork tightened, and he took another bite. A small, almost imperceptible crack in the walls he had built around himself. Liv let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. She moved to sit across from him, resting her elbows on her knees. "You look like hell," she muttered. He let out a short, humorless laugh. "Thanks." She tilted her head. "Do you want to talk about it?" He took a sip of coffee, his fingers tightening around the mug. "What's there to talk about?" "A lot." He shook his head, exhaling. "I don't even know where to start." Liv hesitated, then spoke carefully. "Start with the truth." Adrian was silent for a long time. Then he finally met her gaze. "The truth," he echoed. "The truth is, I didn't want to give you that money. I didn't want you to leave. But I was so damn scared that if I asked you to stay, you'd tell me no." Liv's breath caught. He let out a bitter chuckle, shaking his head. "So, I convinced myself it was better this way. That if I made it easy for you, it wouldn't hurt as much." His fingers tightened around the coffee mug. "I was wrong." She swallowed hard. "Adrian." He looked up, and for the first time since she had walked through that door, his guard was down. "I missed you," he admitted, voice rough with emotion. "Every damn second since you left." Her heart clenched painfully. She should say something. She should tell him that she missed him, too. That walking away hadn't been easy. That she hadn't spent a single night without thinking of him. But the words felt too heavy, too dangerous. So instead, she reached across the table, her fingers grazing his. A small touch, barely there. But it was enough. Adrian's breath hitched. His hand twitched, as if fighting the urge to hold on. But he didn't pull away. Neither of them did. And in that moment, with nothing but the quiet hum of a city outside, they stayed like that, lost in a fragile truce, neither willing to let go just yet. The warmth of his fingers against hers sent a shiver down her spine. It wasn't much, just a brush of skin, a silent thread of connection neither of them was ready to sever. Lev's heart pounded against her ribs. The weight of everything, his words, the way he looked at her, the exhaustion in his face, settled deep in her chest. She had walked away from him, believing it was the right choice. But now, sitting here, watching him unravel in front of her, she wasn't so sure anymore. Adrian let out a slow breath, his fingers finally pulling away. He sat back against the couch, running a hand down his face. "I don't know what you want from me, Liv." Her throat tightened. "I don't know either." He let out a bitter chuckle. "That makes two of us." Silence stretched between them, thick with everything they weren't saying. Liv looked around the apartment, at the empty bottles, the untouched food, the mess he never would have tolerated before. He had always been meticulous in control. Seeing him like this, it twisted something deep inside her. She leaned forward. "When was the last time you actually slept?" He smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Does passing out on the couch count?" "Adrian." He sighed, tilting his head back against the cushions. "A few hours here and there. Nothing worth mentioning." She frowned. "That's not healthy." "I'll survive." She bit her lip. "This isn't you." At that, his jaw tightened. He turned his head, meeting her gaze. "And what is me, Liv?" he asked quietly. She hesitated. "The man who always had it together," she said softly. "The one who made everything look effortless. Who never let anyone see him like this." He let out a sharp breath, a humorless laugh slipping past his lips. "Yeah, well, maybe that man doesn't exist anymore." Something in her chest ached. She wanted to tell him he was wrong, that he was still the same Adrian underneath all of this, that he just needed time to pull himself together. But was he? Had she broken something in him when she left? She swallowed hard. "You don't have to do this alone," he scoffed. "A little late for that, don't you think?" Her fingers curled into her lap. "I didn't want to leave." He stilled. She took a shaky breath. I told myself it was the best thing for both of us, that taking the money and walking away was the right choice. Her throat tightened, but I don't think it was. Adrian's fingers twitched against the armrest. His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, something raw, something hesitant. Why are you really here, Liv? His voice was quiet, careful. She could lie. She could say she was just checking on him, that she wanted to make sure he was okay. But they had spent too long hiding behind half-truths. So instead, she whispered, because I couldn't stop thinking about you. A sharp exhale. His gaze darkened, his fingers gripping the armrest like he was trying to hold himself back. Liv. I don't expect you to forgive me, she cut in. I don't even know if you should. But she broke off, struggling to find the words. I don't know how to stop caring about you. His breath hitched. For a moment, he just stared at her, as if trying to decide whether to believe her. Then, finally, he reached for the coffee mug, taking a slow sip before setting it down with a soft clink. You should get some sleep, he murmured. It's late. Her stomach dropped. That was it? That was all he was going to say? She opened her mouth to protest, but then she caught the way his fingers curled into his palm, the tension in his shoulders, the careful way he avoided her gaze. He wasn't rejecting her. He was protecting himself. Slowly, she nodded. Okay. Adrian stood, rubbing the back of his neck. You can take the guest room, if you still want to stay. I do. A flicker of something crossed his face, something like relief, but not quite. Good night, Liv, he said, voice barely above a whisper. She hesitated before murmuring, good night. Then, with one last lingering glance, she turned and walked down the hall. She told herself she wouldn't look back. But as she stepped into the guest room and closed the door behind her, she couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Not even close. Liv lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The guest room was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that made her thoughts spiral, made her remember the way Adrian had looked at her, like he didn't know whether to pull her close or push her away. She turned onto her side, exhaling. She had thought she was doing the right thing by leaving. That Adrian would move on, that she wouldn't have to carry the weight of everything between them. But now, after seeing him like this, after hearing the broken way he admitted that he missed her, she wasn't sure of anything anymore. A soft sound broke through the silence. Liv tensed, listening. Footsteps. Not hers. She sat up slowly, heart hammering, straining to hear. The sound was muffled but steady, coming from the living room. Adrian. She hesitated before sliding out of bed. She shouldn't go to him. Not when things between them were already so fragile. But the thought of him sitting alone in that dimly lit apartment, drowning in whatever was weighing him down, made it impossible to stay put. Taking a slow breath, she stepped out of the room. Adrian was sitting on the couch, elbows resting on his knees, fingers loosely clasped together. The dim glow of the city lights filtered through the windows, casting shadows across his face. He didn't look up when she entered, but she knew he sensed her presence. Liv swallowed. You couldn't sleep either? A bitter smirk tugged at his lips. Didn't even try. She hesitated before stepping closer. Want some company? He didn't answer right away. His jaw tensed, like he was debating whether to tell her to leave. Then, after a long pause, he exhaled and gestured to the space beside him. Liv sat down, careful to leave a small gap between them. Close, but not too close. For a while, neither of them spoke. The air between them was thick, heavy with unspoken words. Adrian finally broke the silence. I used to be so sure of everything. Liv turned to him, watching as he stared out at the city. My work, my life. I always knew what I was doing, where I was going. Even when things got complicated, I had control. His fingers curled into a fist. But then you came along and suddenly I didn't. Her breath hitched. Adrian let out a low, humorless chuckle. You turned everything upside down. And I hated it. I hated that I couldn't think straight when you were around. That you made me want things I wasn't supposed to want. Liv's fingers tightened in her lap. I never meant to. I know. He finally looked at her, and the intensity in his gaze nearly stole her breath. But that didn't change the fact that you did. She swallowed hard. Adrian. And then you left. His voice was quieter now, rougher. And I thought, maybe it would go away. Maybe, if I just let you go, everything would go back to the way it was. Liv's chest ached. He shook his head. It didn't. The weight of his words settled between them, thick and inescapable. Her pulse pounded as she whispered, I never stopped thinking about you. Something flickered in his eyes, something vulnerable, something raw. Neither of them moved. Then, slowly, Adrian reached out. His fingers barely grazed hers, hesitant, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to touch her. Liv's breath caught. She could pull away. She should pull away. But she didn't. Instead, she turned her hand over, letting his fingers brush against her palm. A slow, tentative connection. Adrian's throat bobbed as he swallowed. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. She curled her fingers slightly, brushing against his. Neither do I. For a moment, they just sat there, lost in the quiet weight of their emotions. Then, ever so slowly, Adrian laced his fingers through hers. Not demanding, not forceful, just holding on. And Liv realized in that moment that maybe neither of them needed all the answers just yet. Maybe, for now, this was enough. Adrian's fingers remained tangled with hers, his grip light but unwavering. Liv wasn't sure how long they sat there like that, minutes, hours? Time blurred, the weight of everything pressing between them. She could feel his warmth, the quiet strength in his touch. And yet, there was hesitation too, a careful restraint. Like he was afraid that if he held on too tightly, she'd slip away again. I should go back to bed, she murmured, though she made no move to pull her hand away. Adrian exhaled slowly.
Yeah.
You should. Still, neither of them moved. Liv bit her lip. You're not going to sleep, are you? A ghost of a smirk touched his lips. Didn't say I would. She sighed, shifting slightly to face him. You can't keep running on empty like this. Adrian arched a brow. Funny, coming from the woman who barely slept when we were together. Her chest tightened at the reminder. Back then, she had always been the restless one, lying awake while he slept beside her, lost in thoughts she couldn't voice.
And now?
Now he was the one drowning in sleepless nights, and she was the reason why. She squeezed his hand gently. Come to bed. His gaze flickered to hers, something unreadable passing through his expression. A beat of silence. Then, you don't mean that. Her breath caught. Adrian's fingers tightened around hers, just slightly. If I follow you into that room, we both know what'll happen, Liv. His voice was low, rough. And I don't think either of us is ready for that. Heat crawled up her spine.
She should say something.
Should pull away. But instead, she whispered. Then what do you want me to do? His jaw clenched. I want you to tell me why you left. She stilled. Adrian's grip on her hand didn't loosen, but there was a new tension in his posture now, his body coiled tight like he was bracing for impact. You say you didn't want to go, he murmured. You say you never stopped thinking about me. His gaze darkened. But you still walked away. Liv's throat tightened. I thought it was the right thing to do. For who? His voice was sharp now, cutting through the silence like a blade. Because it sure as hell wasn't for me. She swallowed hard. For us. Adrian let out a bitter laugh, finally pulling his hand away. The absence of his touch left her cold. Don't do that, he muttered. Do what? He looked at her then, and for the first time, she saw it. The raw, unguarded pain lurking beneath the surface. Pretend like you were saving me when all you did was break me. Her breath caught. She wanted to deny it. To tell him that she had done it because she cared. But she saw the truth in his eyes. Adrian had spent all these months thinking she had left because she didn't love him enough. That he hadn't been enough. And now, sitting here, she realized just how much she had truly hurt him. Her fingers curled into her lap. I was scared. His brows furrowed slightly, but he said nothing. Liv took a shaky breath. Of what I felt for you. Of how much I needed you. Adrian's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted, just a fraction. She exhaled, forcing herself to keep going. You are the one person who could break me. Her voice wavered. And I didn't know how to handle that. Silence. For a long moment, Adrian didn't move, didn't speak. Then, finally, he leaned back against the couch, rubbing a hand over his face. You really think you're the only one who is scared? Her breath hitched. Adrian let out a low chuckle, shaking his head. You had me, Liv. You still have me. His gaze flickered to hers, heavy with emotion. And it scares the hell out of me too. The confession stole the air from her lungs. They sat there, hearts pounding, the weight of everything pressing between them. Then, Adrian stood. The sudden loss of his presence made her chest tighten. He turned toward the hallway, pausing just long enough to glance back at her. I can't do this tonight, he murmured. Liv swallowed hard. Adrian. I want to figure this out, he admitted, voice thick with something unreadable. But not when we're both on the edge of breaking. Her fingers clenched into the fabric of her pants. She wanted to argue, to tell him she didn't want to wait. But then she saw it, the exhaustion in his face, the quiet restraint in his posture. He was holding himself back for a reason. So instead, she nodded. Okay. Adrian lingered for a second longer, as if debating whether to say more. Then, with a quiet sigh, he turned and disappeared down the hall. Liv sat there, staring at the empty space he left behind, her heart pounding in her chest. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Liv couldn't sleep. Even after Adrian had walked away, after the house had fallen into silence again, her mind wouldn't stop spinning. She had always believed that leaving had been the right choice. That stepping away would give them both a chance to breathe, to reset. But seeing him now, seeing the exhaustion in his face, the unspoken hurt in his voice, she realized she had been wrong. She hadn't saved them. She had only run from the inevitable. And now it was time to stop running. Taking a deep breath, she slid out of bed and padded quietly down the hall. She hesitated in front of Adrian's door. A soft glow seeped from underneath. He was still awake. Her pulse pounded as she raised her hand and knocked lightly. No answer. But after a moment, the door clicked open. Adrian stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Neither of them spoke. Then, finally, Liv whispered, Can I come in? Adrian didn't reply. He only stepped aside, letting her in. The room was dimly lit, the air thick with tension. Liv turned to him, fingers curling into the hem of her shirt. I don't want to keep doing this. Adrian arched a brow. Doing what? This back and forth. The pushing and pulling. She exhaled. I want to stop being afraid. His throat bobbed as he swallowed. Liv. I love you. The words slipped out before she could second-guess them. A muscle ticked in his jaw. I love you, she repeated, firmer this time. I never stopped. And leaving was the biggest mistake of my life. Adrian's eyes darkened, emotions swirling beneath the surface. For a moment he said nothing. Then, slowly, he reached out, fingertips brushing against her cheek, so lightly it sent shivers down her spine. Say it again, he murmured. Her breath hitched. I love you. Adrian exhaled sharply, his control snapping as he cupped her face, pulling her closer. The moment his lips met hers, everything else faded. It wasn't a desperate kiss, or a frantic one. It was slow, deep, filled with all the words they hadn't said, all the longing that had built between them for far too long. Liv melted into him, her fingers gripping his shirt like she was afraid he'd disappear. But Adrian wasn't going anywhere.
Not this time.
When they finally broke apart, his forehead rested against hers, breaths mingling. I love you too, he whispered. Liv let out a shaky laugh, relief flooding through her. Stay, he murmured. She nodded. Always. And this time, she meant it. For the first time in forever, they weren't running. They were exactly where they were meant to be. Together. The morning sun poured through the sheer curtains, casting a golden glow across the room. The air was quiet, warm, filled with the scent of fresh linen and something distinctly Adrian, woodsy and familiar, like home. Liv stirred, shifting slightly under the weight of the arm draped across her waist. For a moment, she didn't move, just listened to the steady rhythm of Adrian's breathing behind her.
Slow.
Peaceful. It felt surreal. For so long, she had been running, afraid of what it meant to let herself love him fully, to surrender to the kind of connection that left no room for escape.
But now?
Now, she was exactly where she wanted to be. Smiling to herself, she carefully turned in his arms, her gaze tracing over the relaxed lines of his face. Adrian looked different like this, unguarded, his usual intensity softened by sleep. Her fingers twitched with the urge to touch him, to memorize the way he looked in this quiet moment. As if sensing her gaze, Adrian let out a slow breath, his lashes fluttering open. His stormy eyes met hers, and for a brief second, he just stared, like he wasn't sure if she was real. Then a slow, lazy smirk curled at his lips. "You're staring," he murmured, voice thick with sleep. Liv rolled her eyes, but she couldn't help the warmth spreading through her chest. "Maybe." Adrian hummed, his fingers tracing lazy patterns along her hip. "If this is a dream, don't wake me up." Her heart clenched at the quiet vulnerability in his voice. She reached up, cupping his cheek. "It's not a dream." He exhaled, pressing his face into her touch. For a moment, they stayed like that, lost in the kind of silence that didn't need words. Then, Adrian's lips quirked up. So, his fingers danced teasingly along her side. "Does this mean you're officially stuck with me?" Liv arched a brow. "Stuck." He smirked. "Trapped. No escape. Completely and utterly mine." Her stomach flipped, but she schooled her expression into something unimpressed. "That's a bold claim." Adrian rolled her onto her back in one smooth motion, hovering over her, his smirk deepening. "Then tell me I'm wrong." Liv opened her mouth, to argue, to tease, only for him to cut her off with a slow, lingering kiss. By the time he pulled away, she was breathless. Adrian's gaze flickered to her lips, then back to her eyes. "That's what I thought." Liv huffed. "Cocky." "Only when I'm right." He kissed her forehead. "And I am right, by the way." She rolled her eyes but couldn't hide the smile tugging at her lips. Adrian tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his expression turning softer. "I mean it, Liv," he murmured. "No more running. No more pushing each other away." His thumb brushed against her cheek. "You're it for me." Her chest tightened, her throat thick with emotion. She laced her fingers through his, squeezing gently. "You're it for me too." Adrian's expression softened, and in that moment, she knew this was it. No more doubts. No more hesitation. Just them, exactly as they were meant to be. Together. Always.